Our next speaker is another one of our IH teachers, Veronika Balkind. Veronika teaches across all levels and ages, and today she is going to talk to us about how to turn the social media enemy into our friend in the classroom. So I would think a very relevant topic for most of us. Welcome, Veronika. I'm going to turn off my video and mute myself and turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Right, I hope you all can hear me well and see my screen very well as well. Right, so today we're going to talk about how to turn the social media, networking websites and applications into our classroom assistants. I guess all of you can recognize the icons on my cover. And before we move on, I'd actually like to know how much you use social media a day. Can you type your answers in the chat, please? Way too much. Okay, a lot. Try to reduce it, good for you. Okay, some hours, way too much. Okay, about an hour, a couple of hours a day, right? Indeed, we all have to embrace the fact that social media is becoming a part of our life. We do spend a lot of time scrolling down newsfeed. We get distracted by notifications very often. And if this happens to us, how can we expect younger human beings to avoid using their phones every now and then, especially during the lessons? Well, perhaps we shouldn't. Perhaps we should think how to come from here to here, how to use the electronic devices in our classrooms. And before we move on, I'd like you to know what engagement is for you. Before I give you an engaging task, I'd like you to tell me what you understand by engagement. Motivation, okay. Interest, stimulating, I like all those words. Curiosity, being involved, participation, interest, attention, connection, that's a good one. Fun, interesting but challenging, good one. Okay. Curiosity, right, okay. Also care, involving. I agree with all of your words, guys, and well, my top priority would be motivation, of course. Without motivation, there is no engagement. Think about what your students are motivated by. Then think about how relevant it is for your students and what's the purpose? What do you seek with this task? Don't assign a task just to keep your teenagers busy. We don't want to keep them busy. We want them to learn through their experience. Implementation, don't forget to implement. Don't be afraid of introducing something new. Your students will appreciate it, I'm pretty sure. And remember that your students are the main sources of implementation. Remember that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. What we seek is listening more and speaking less. Mastery. Think about what skills your students are going to master. I've come to this conclusion after I watched a few talks by Sarah Mercer and Zoltan Durney. They have written some books about engagement and motivation. They have even collaborated together. So if you have a chance, please give them a look as well. Okay, so what are we going to do today? We're going to look at how we can apply our passion and hobbies to lessons. That's very important because if you do something you don't really like, your students will feel it. Then we're going to look at one of the ways how students can learn to do research using social media and the internet on the whole, and thus provoke the learner autonomy, which is what we seek in the 21st century, aren't we? Then I'm going to introduce you a task I've designed to revise comparative and superlative adjectives. And then we're going to identify potential problems of using phones in class during the activities that require using the phones. And then I hope there will be some time for your questions. So, where did it come from? Last year, I had a course of FCE students. I was preparing them for the first exam. And that course was quite intensive. I basically didn't have enough room for any free lessons for my own activities. I had to follow the course program quite strictly. However, once I came across this task, writing task 1, which is an essay, that sounded like, which is better, listening to music at home or going to concerts? Include the following: the experience, costs, and your own idea. Well, a typical essay task, isn't it? And be that another topic, I would say, okay, so in groups, brainstorm your ideas. But that group was very, very keen on music, even though they were listening to different genres. They were all keen on speaking about music, and so was I. I myself very passionate about rock shows, concerts in general, and since that group was quite motivated already and the level of English was quite good, I decided to sacrifice the half of the lesson doing my stuff. I wanted my students to remember my lessons at the end of the day. So that's the lead-in that I did with them. So I asked them to talk to their partners and say where they like going out and why, at which place they enjoyed the most, even without thinking about concerts. So can you now answer these questions in the chat as if you were my students? Where do you guys like going out? Shopping? A nice restaurant? Okay. Okay, cinema, park. Trekking, okay. Theater, good. Yeah, not now for gyms, definitely. Okay. Okay, cinema. All right. Pubs, okay. And with the next question, I would try to slightly lead them into my activity. Have you ever been to any live shows? What was it? Can you type your answer in the chat, please? Any live shows experience? Many concerts? Musicals? U2, okay. Okay. Bruno Mars, Madonna, Sting. What about Rocky in London? Wow. Okay. All right. Good. So my next step would be showing them a few pictures of venues in Milan. At this stage, maybe you don't want to listen the names, but I guess you want to listen the word itself, venue. And drill the pronunciation if needed. I'm not sure if your students are aware of IPA, but if they are, feel free to show that as well. Okay, then I would introduce the teamwork. I would divide my students into teams and ask them to write as many Milanese venues as they can using the mini whiteboards. You can find them in Tiger shops, but if you don't have them, you can simply laminate a piece of paper and give your students whiteboard markers. If you're doing this online, I guess if you're using Zoom, you can simply divide them into breakout rooms, or if you're using another software, then you can simply share your document on Google Docs, for example. This should work as well. So then you're going to time them, of course, depending on how much time you have, for example, 3 minutes, and tell them that the winner would be a team with the biggest number of the venues on the list. This should be fun. So then you can show the pictures again and list the names. So this one, for example, is Milano Forum, and this one, San Siro Stadium. At this point, you can also highlight the fact that these venues are used not only for sporting events, but also for music shows. All right, so here is the task itself. Complete the table below. So what are you going to do? You're going to ask your students to find a venue on social media, find their page, and find the following information. When that venue was open, how large is that? The number of followers on Facebook and the number of followers on Instagram. I don't know how far your teen students use Facebook nowadays. However, there are many venues that have their official pages on Facebook. Some don't even have their websites, for example. If some information is missing, such as when the venue was open and how large it is, then ask your students to use Wikipedia or Google search in general. That's how they're going to learn how to do research. So for the sake of time saving, I've completed just 2 venues. So as you can see, San Siro doesn't even have the official account on Instagram, and this could be another subject to discuss with your students. The next step would be to think of the adjectives with the following sections: open in, capacity, and number of followers. The first example has been done for your students already, but encourage them to use more complicated adjectives, again, depending on the level of your students. Now, can you try out this activity by yourselves? Can you type some adjectives in the chat, please? Some adjectives. Yeah, okay. You? Modern, okay. Brand new, good one. Recent. For capacity, large, okay. Right, big, white, enormous, thank you, yeah. Newly opened, good one. Okay, small. How about the number of followers? Ancient. We're talking about Verona Arena, I guess. Popular, okay. Outdated. Okay, right, well, my examples are quite similar to yours. I also had relatively new, spacious, probably well-known with the number of followers. And then my next step would be to ask students to come up with sentences using the adjectives from the exercise 2. So using this table and the adjectives you've come up with, can you try making some sentences? How can you compare Milano Forum and San Siro? San Siro has a much larger capacity, okay? Not just larger, but much larger. Okay, so encourages students to use more complicated structures. Older has a lot more followers, okay? Okay. How about making sentences using comparatives and superlatives? More popular than, okay, good. Definitely, San Zero should get an Instagram account. This could be another task for your students. Maybe you can set it as homework, for example, pretending that they are students, and write an email to San Zero asking to create their Instagram account. Okay, right. The graded capacity. Okay, well, I've got these basic sentences. San Siro Stadium is much older than Milano Forum. So again, encourage your students to use more complicated structures instead of using older than, much older than. And Milano Forum is much more popular than the San Siro Stadium. Okay, right. Let's consider some aspects for this kind of activity. Do you think you could replace live shows with something else, with other leisure activities, for example, sport? If your students are very interested in it, perhaps you could use the same venues. How about eating out? Perhaps they could compare different restaurants, different pizzeria chains. What do you think? How about video games? Maybe they could compare different reviews. Language learning apps, which I like. Right. So there is a room for plenty of ideas. Okay. Is this activity online friendly? Do you think you could adapt it to your online lessons? Yeah. Okay, that's right. Yeah, again, as I said, you can use the share screen option, share your document. Okay. Is it adaptable? Think about the level of your students. Well, perhaps we wouldn't use it for with our younger learners, but perhaps we can use it with younger teens, especially for video games. And could we use it with adults as well? Do you think your adults will enjoy it? B1 level, yeah. Okay. Hmm. Yes, that's right. Yeah, not very beginners, because this activity seeks to revise comparatives and superlatives. So we already expect our students to have some knowledge. Okay. Right, it could work with adults. Okay. Is it relevant and autonomous? Well, it is relevant if you pick your students' interests, right? And of course, it's autonomous because there is no teacher involved, really. You're just going to monitor your students to make sure that they are doing the right job. So it is autonomous. They're going to work as part of team. Okay. Will your students find it enjoyable? I hope so. Any cognitive and behavioral competence here? How do you think your students are going to benefit from it? Any comments on that? Any comments on the components? Well, your students might develop their critical thinking abilities because they don't just do research, they also need to analyze the information by comparing different venues, right? And as for behavioral component, they're going to work as team. So that's important as well. This might be useful for their future. Yeah, right, working in teams, analyze the information, yeah, okay, collaborative task. Interaction, they learn to interact, that's important, their age. Okay, And this might be useful later on when they go to university. So, of course, yeah, pair work. Okay, good. Right. Before we move on to your question, guys, let's look at some possible problems that might come up. For example, what happens when your students get distracted during the activity that requires using their phones? For example, they are doing research and then suddenly there is a notification coming up and, well, they start reading it and thus they get distracted. How do we deal with fast finishers? What if they take their phones immediately after a test or writing task? Not particularly for this activity, but in general, I'm pretty sure that this has happened to you at least once in your teaching experience. How would you deal with that? And what if your students end up speaking their first language when doing research together? I'd like you to type your possible solutions in the chat. Let's see what ideas we can have. Time limit, yes, thank you. Okay. Be prepared for fillers. Okay, asking them to put up the notifications, yes. Okay. Competitive aspect, yeah. For the first problem, okay. They can help their friends, yeah, okay. Yeah, just ask students to turn off their phones. Encouraging them to use L2 as much as possible, a good one. Okay. I like the idea about fast finishers working as tutors in the class so they can help teachers. Give the marks for speed, interesting, okay. Well, let's see what ideas I have here, and some of them are quite similar. Oh, sorry. Okay. So, for example, for the first problem, when your students get distracted, you might come up with a low word. For example, the team that finishes the task first will get less homework. I don't know if you like this idea or not, but I'm pretty sure that they will be much more motivated. Okay, for the second problem, with fast finishers, I would say find the balance. Allow them to use their phones, but perhaps I should ask them to use English only, and then report to the class what they found. So this way they might avoid chatting with their friends on WhatsApp, for example, unless they want to speak English and then report something about their conversation, which I really doubt. For the third one, well, I'm not sure if there is much you can change in the stage in the middle of the course, for example. Perhaps encouraging them to use L2 as much as they can is the best solution. But next time when you start your new course, ask yourself, how can you introduce the rules? How can you reduce using L1? So again, it's all about compromising and finding the balance. Perhaps you can come up with some sort of agreement with your students and what happens in case they break the rules. Okay, I've even tried implementing push-ups for speaking L1 back in the days when I was teaching in Moscow. That was with teens and that worked quite well because they were quite sportive as well. Okay, here if they speak L1, they get more homework. That's right. I like that idea. All right, good. Okay. Well, indeed, using our phones has become so natural nowadays so that sometimes we don't even realize that something is wrong, especially if we talk about our students. They don't even realize that they're doing something wrong and the teachers are not happy and they don't understand why. But please, don't tell off your students for this. not in the 21st century. Please. Okay, right. It looks like we're coming to the end. Do you have any questions?
Well, it looks like there aren't any questions at the moment. If anyone does have any questions, please do
Yeah, I
put
can
them
see
in
some
the chat.
questions.
Oh, there is a question.
Yeah,
Excellent.
they're chatting. Do you have them, Veronika?
Yes, I think I can see them. Is it advisable to prepare a list of websites or sources? Yes, if you want, you can, especially if you have time, you can look at the resources by yourself in advance, just to prepare. But again, if you actually want them to learn how to do research, they should be able to learn how to use the search engines. So probably that would be the top priority. Any site where we can share ideas and advice? I'm not sure. Okay. I'm not sure what you mean by this. I'm sorry. Do you think it's useful to talk about social media in class? Concentrating on learning English vocabulary for the web and socials. Yes, of course. You can even come up with a lesson dedicated to writing comments. Something about slang, for example, of course. Yes, we do need vocabulary for social media. Okay.
Okay, and I think that's it for now.
Okay, yeah, let me just sum it up. So, getting back to what I started with, how would you rather start your lesson? A, today we're going to revise comparatives and superlatives. Or B, right, I'd like to know where you like going out. How would you start? A or B? B, everyone. Okay, that's the correct answer. Well, I don't think I have anything else to say. So if you didn't have a chance to ask me questions in the Q&A session, or if you didn't have time, please feel free to email me your questions. I'll be happy to answer them. All right, so that's it. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is